What's up, everybody? Welcome back for another episode. We have to talk about this video from the Washington Post. We have another piece of anti-white propaganda. Guys, what is white racial identity and why it's important? Now, if you haven't noticed, white people have been under assault for years now, have been getting these false claims that they are walking around with all of this privilege, that white supremacy upholds their whiteness. Whiteness is the essence of America. To be white means to be American. To be American means to be white. All of these things that we've heard over and over and over. We have another piece that just echoes all of these conspiracy theories that ultimately come from critical race theory. And we're going to talk about that today in this video. Without wasting any time, guys, let's go ahead and dive right in. But before we do that, make sure you join the journey to 5,000 subs. Like, comment, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you're notified anytime I make a video. And let's be brainwashed together and listen to our host, Nicole Ellis, among others, talk about what is white racial identity and why it's important.
Racism, racialization, white body supremacy is not episodic, it's structural. Remember that there were thousands of George Floyd before the one that you saw. Your bodily response to this horror, right, is not the same thing as you dealing with the structural aspects of this.
So I'm going to pause right there because you guys heard him say racism is not episodic. It's structural. What critical race theorists and social justice warriors mean here, guys, is that racism is not some character flaw. Yes, racism can happen on an individual level, but it is always systematic. Now, the definitions that you guys have to be able to identify to and realize this is where they're getting this from. I got this piece from the Federalist, and they got this information from an actual critical race theory class. And I want you to pay attention to how the instructor is talking about racism. So racism is the belief. That race is the primary determinant of human traits and capacities, and that racial differences produce an inherent superiority of a particular race. So if you believe, so racism is a belief. So if you believe that race is the primary determinant of human traits and capacities, then you know what? That makes you a racist. But look at this. So it goes from an individual belief, because racism has to be first and foremost an individual belief. Then they attach it to a system. Racism is a system. Now, here is the new lingo. And if you don't understand this, you're not going to understand critical race theory, and you're not going to understand what they mean by systemic racism. Racism is a system. It is not an individual character flaw, nor a personal moral failing, nor a psychiatric illness. It is a system consisting of structures, policies, practices, and norms that structures opportunity and assigns value based on phenotype, or the way people look. It unfairly disadvantages some individuals and communities, yet even more profoundly, the systemic racism undermines realization of the full potential of our whole society because of the waste of human resources. So to that point, guys, if you look at what they're talking about, here's an honest question. If racism is a belief that race is the primary determinant of human traits and capacities, then how do you end up with a system of racism when the majority of white people, when the majority of people don't hold the view that Black people's skin is viewed in a negative way, that Black people, just because they have darker pigment, that their skin color in no way hinders their capacities, their abilities, their intellect? If you don't have a group of people who don't believe that, then how the heck do you have a systemically racist system? Because, guys, remember, racism is a belief. So if the belief is not there, then how do you have a systemically racist system? because systems are made up of individuals. So if the majority of individuals in the system affirm colorblindness, you guys know that most conservatives, most Republicans advocate for colorblindness and acknowledge that content of character is greater than skin color. How the heck can the system be deemed racist? How is it that a group of people who are white that say colorblind, I'm colorblind, how can those people that don't have the belief of racism then be lumped into this category of, well, you are aiding and abetting in this structure of racism? Guys, it just doesn't make sense. So let's hop back into the Washington Post video.
Floyd's death became a deeply personal and racial tragedy for many Americans. For the first time, white people were becoming aware of their whiteness and the systemic ways that white supremacy affects all of us.
Yeah, so guys, right there, another thing. George Floyd was a racial tragedy, according to this woman. But the reality is there was not an ounce, not a speck, not a drop of evidence that was brought forth during the case against former officer Chauvin that racism had anything to do with this. Racism was not talked about during the trial. Again, the prosecution brought no sort of evidence that would even imply that what happened to George Floyd was racially motivated. I mean, the fact of the matter is this, guys. Whiteness is a conspiracy theory. It's a made-up word. It was made up by race-obsessed scholars who spent years trying to create a new language so that they could peddle their critical race theory views, and they landed on the word whiteness. And now they're trying to push that word on the masses.
People in particular get aroused, get upset, say, this is unjust, this isn't right, this shouldn't happen. There's like an awakening that happens. And so part of their racial identity development is seeing that awakening. What they do with it is really the next piece of it.
In this episode, we're tackling white racial identity and why understanding your whiteness is integral to becoming self-aware as a white person. I'm Nicole Ellis, and this is the new normal.
And this is the new normal, guys. This is, I mean, all you white people better repent of your whiteness. This video is going to feel even more cultish. And the reason why it's going to feel like a cult is because it is a modern day cult.
I am originally from a smaller town in Oklahoma. Whiteness was the default and whiteness was the comfort.
Part of the structure of racism in the way that it's maintained is to keep us from recognizing that racism is a part of our daily lives. And so it's a longer term process of looking at your understanding of yourself in the world, both historically, but also contextually, the family you live in, the community you live in, and what role whiteness plays in that.
The more you kind of dive into that, the more I'm really realizing how deeply rooted racism is into like my everyday thought process. No matter how much you work at that, there's still even almost more work to be done.
A living, embodied anti-racist culture does not exist among white people. White people got to start getting together, specifically around race.
White accountability groups are really helpful in terms of having a place to process, having a group of people whose responsibility it is to call me on things or to challenge me.
We're unpacking wrong things that we've been taught in history class. I realized that I needed to go back and unpack and reorganize everything that I had learned because it was completely through a white lens. Most of us in doing this work have experienced this, where there's a period of deep shame for being white and for acknowledging the harm that our ancestors have caused. And that's a very legitimate piece of this work. And we can't ask people of color to hold our hands through the shame piece. That needs to happen with other white people.
Wow, guys, shame. I mean, it's clear as day. This is a cult. This is a cult tactic. This is one of the goals Trying to obtain a goal by shaming people is what a cult does, and it is evil. And this white girl has bought this ideology. She's thrown away the receipt, and she's moving forward in trying to get over her shame in what her ancestors did. So mind you that most of these people, this woman right here, oh, it's about what my ancestors did. Most white people today are not racist. And we don't have to expect people to turn away from their sin that they didn't commit only because we think that they should repent of it or confess it due to the fact that their ancestors committed it. What? And how do you know? How does that white girl know that it was that her ancestors were racist? How does she know that? She doesn't. She probably doesn't. She may. I don't know. Guys, the answer to this is simple. No. I'm not going to join a white person accountability group. This isn't an AA session. No, I don't benefit from this invisible force of white supremacy. No, my privilege doesn't come from my skin color. It came from my life choices and the many people who helped me along the way. No, I'm not racist. And no, I will not be coerced and brainwashed to join your cult. So that's how we have to move forward with this stuff. You just have to look at it and say, this is garbage. This is cultish. This is lies. And I'm not going to join your white accountability group. It's absolute nonsense, guys.
When you do that for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, right? You end up with actually a community that is aligned with each other.
In theory, that sounds like a good idea, but I guess I'm curious to hear, like, what are some of the pitfalls or risks that you run if that's the only step you take?
The biggest answer is white people don't really understand racism. And so if I'm relying on other white people to teach me about racism, that can only go so far. I only best understand racism by talking to people who are directly impacted by racism from different perspectives. So in addition to having white accountability groups and white accountability buddies, it's also really important to have sustained and meaningful relationships with people of color.
So white people can't understand racism. There's a flaw in white people's intellect or their moral compass that they're unable to recognize and understand racism. Do you see how nonsensical that is? Just because of the color of your skin, you can't understand this. I mean, that right there, it's such a I forget what people call this, but it's like, oh, you didn't experience it, so you can't possibly know what this is. Well, that might be true for some things, but it's not true for all things, and it's not true for racism. For that to be true, you must have to think that white people lack the intellect to grasp what racism is and lack the moral code, the moral compass to notice when they are wrongfully discriminating against others. I mean, we looked at what critical race theory taught. Racism is a belief. Well, if I don't have that belief, then how does that still make me a racist? That's the illogical part of this whole movement. You could not have that belief, but still be part of and peddling a white supremacist system.
I don't have the ability to inherently name things as upholding white supremacy or as being racist. My whiteness is going to show up at different points in my life and at different points in different relationships.
But is it fair or healthy to be seeking out relationships with people just to have a diverse network? Because I feel like for people of color, you're kind of constantly trying to gauge whether or not it's worth it to be vulnerable or share how someone hurt you when your white colleagues or coworkers or friends mess up.
There's a different cost for my friends of color to be in relationship with me. So I think one of the things that's really important is ongoing.
I like the nice somber background music
for lots of different things, not just thinking about racism
Such
as a part
somber
of our friendship
topic.
when there's something horrible that happens. those relationships are, number one, for me to be there for them as them for me. It's a relationship, and so it should be reciprocal, but also so that I have a broader understanding of the world.
Everything I thought about how I existed in my white body in the world was very wrong. And I needed this new lens to see the world through. So I think that's been a big piece of my own work.
We're going to continue to cover topics like this in the coming weeks, so stay tuned. For more stories like this one, follow the Lily on Instagram.
Okay, so guys, there you have it. More anti-white pieces of propaganda, guys. All you have to do, you just smile, and as I said, just say no. No, I'm not going to believe that I need to be a part of some white AA group for racism. No, I don't want to acknowledge your made up word of whiteness. No, the privilege you say I have, actually, my success was because I made many good decisions over days, months, years, decades. Thus, I'm able to retire and live in a, decent house. All of the things that when people like this look at, like Nicole, what was her name? Ellis, whatever her first name was. When people like her look at older white people, who have retired and are living a good life, they say, oh, it's because of their privilege. But they don't ever acknowledge the fact that these people, no matter what, that these people are making decisions that directly impact their life in a fruitful way. At the end of the day, guys, like I've said many times on this channel, whiteness is a conspiracy theory. Critical race theory is a spin off of Marxism. Critical race theory is just a race obsessed. These people are race obsessed, and they want to jam this ideology down our throats, this leftist ideology, as fact and true, when indeed it's not. So because it's a lie and because it is being forced upon us, it is very important that we just be able to do what we have to do, which is say no and tell the truth. I'm not going to believe that crap because it's nonsense. Anyways, guys, I think I'm going to leave that right there. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Make sure you like, comment, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you're notified anytime I make a video. I will see you good people on the next one. As always, guys, God bless. Peace.